Hi, I'm Andy Walker. Welcome to Digital Farm Rural TV News. The National Farmers Federation late last week released Farm Facts 2012, which shows that agriculture continues to grow both its food and fibre production and its contribution to Australia's economy. NFF President Jock Laurie said that Farm Facts 2012 showed that agriculture continued to play a vital, important role in Australia's society, economy and environment. Farm Facts 2012 showed that while agriculture may be a relatively small industry, Australia was certainly punching above its weight, Mr Laurie said. The contribution that our farmers and the agricultural sector make to Australia, and indeed the world, is of vital importance, and Farm Facts 2012 reflects this. Australian farmers produced almost 93% of Australia's daily domestic food supply. The average Australian farmer grows enough food to feed 600 people, 150 at home and 450 abroad. In 2010-11 alone, Australia's farm exports earned the country $32.5 billion, up $400 million in 2 years. The gross value of Australian farm production at Farmgate in 2009-10 was $48.7 billion, up a massive $600,000 million in just 1 year. Wine grapes in Australia's south were ripening on average 20 days earlier than they did in 1985, according to a study that has attributed this trend to climate change, smaller harvests and improved technology at vineyards. CSIRO and University of Melbourne scientists who studied vintage records from 10 vineyards in 5 regions found that between 1946 and 2009, grapes continued to mature earlier at all but one site. The regions included in the study were from Victoria, Mornington Peninsula, Rutherglen and Central Victoria, South Australia, Eden and Western Australia, Margaret River. A postdoctoral research fellow at the CSIRO, Leanne Webb, said that early ripening of wine grapes often had undesirable impacts on wine quality. The industry was intimately wedded to the concept of terroir, matching grape varieties to unique combinations of climate and soils to produce distinctive styles. The study set out to test the assumption that the earlier ripening of wine grapes was due to regional warming, according to Leanne Webb. The study found that only about a third of the shift was driven by regional warming. Other factors included declining soil water content, smaller harvests and evolving management practices. Australia's first independent think tank dedicated to regional issues was launched at Parliament House in Canberra last week. Former New South Wales Farmers President Mel Peters will chair the Regional Australia Institute, which was born out of federal government promises to independent regional MPs Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott. RAI Chair Mel Peters said regional Australia was experiencing massive opportunities, particularly in mining, food and communications. To build a resilient economy for the future of all Australians, we need an informed rethink of regional policy, he said. The Regional Australia Institute has been established with $8 million seed funding from the federal government. The Australian Livestock Exporters Council, ALEC, said late last week it was aware that the Federal Department of Agriculture had received fresh complaints of animal welfare breaches at 2 Indonesian abattoirs. ALEC said it understood departmental officers were reviewing Animals Australia videotape and checking if the abattoirs in question were operating under the Exporter Supply Chain Assurance System. In July last year, the Australian government established a new regulatory framework for the export of livestock, SCAS, which the livestock industry was working closely with government to implement across all export markets. SCAS holds individual exporters and supply chains responsible for animal welfare practices. Meanwhile, Sheep Meat Council of Australia President Ian McColl returned last week from the Middle East and Turkey, confident that significant progress was being made in addressing animal welfare challenges in those markets. The council was part of a federal government industry delegation led by Agriculture Minister Joe Ludwig, which visited the live export markets of Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Mr McColl also visited Turkey, which is an important market for Australian livestock. Importers in all countries now had a much better understanding of the new animal welfare arrangements, especially those that came into effect at the end of last month, Mr McColl said. He said he believed Australian livestock would continue to play an important part in meeting the food security needs of the countries of the region. One death in New South Wales, Murray-Darling Basin rivers waterways overflowing, the Army mobilised, small towns and cities inundated, households evacuated, highways and transport lines cut. The rural populations of North, Central and Eastern Australia could be forgiven for fearing we were all about to be washed away this past week as 50-year record rainfall battered towns and farms over a large part of the continent. The Bureau of Meteorology reported that our chances of receiving above median rainfall for autumn are higher than 60% over much of the continent's eastern half, rising to between 70 and 75% in a broad area west of Townsville. This outlook was mostly due to warmer than normal waters in the Indian Ocean, while cooler Pacific waters associated with La Nina had had a lesser impact. The chances of receiving above normal rainfall were between 30 and 40% over southwest Western Australia, southern Victoria and Tasmania. The La Nina effect, which had dominated over climate since spring, had shown signs of weakening. Computer models surveyed by the Bureau suggested La Nina would continue declining during the southern hemisphere autumn. Flour made from genetically modified wheat and barley may be trialled on humans, according to a report in the latest Weekly Times newspaper. The human testing would be done under a program approved by the Office of Gene Technology Regulator. But first, the GM product would be tested on animals to see if it improved bowel health. The Gene Technology Regulator had approved a licence application from the CSIRO to grow 2.3 hectares of GM wheat and barley in the ACT each year between May this year and June 2017. The grain varieties were genetically modified for altered grain composition, nutrient utilisation efficiency, disease resistance or stress tolerance. The important role animal health would play in meeting the challenge of feeding a burgeoning world population was highlighted last week at a conference at Edinburgh's Moredun Research Institute in Scotland. Moredun's scientific director, Professor Julie Fitzpatrick, who is also Professor of Food Security at the University of Edinburgh, pointed in particular to the importance of animal health to the 700 million of the world's poorest people who relied on farming animals for their survival. Infectious diseases of food-producing animals result in reduced efficiency or significant losses in food production and adversely affect animal welfare and trade, Professor Fitzpatrick said. Effective control of animal pathogens was crucial not only for safeguarding and securing national and international food supplies, but also for alleviating rural poverty in developing countries.